Hello primary 4 students, I'm Mrs. Duai, and this is the last lesson of share in concept 4 energy and collision. And this also will be the last lesson of unit 2 motion. Today, you will use all the information you learned about energy and collision to investigate real crashes. This will be during activity number 11, analyze like a scientist. Analyze like a scientist is a STEM in action activity. In STEM activities, we always connect what we have learned to real world problems or to different STEM jobs, like the job of crash investigators. Crash investigators, محققي تصادم السيارات. Crash investigator is the one that will do today. You will act like a crash investigator to analyze a group of different photos of cars which had accidents, to know the real reasons and the factors that lead to a collision or car crashes. The car makers use the data recorded by crash investigators during their investigation to think of different factors that can keep the passengers safe. مصنعي السيارات بياخدوا كل المعلومات الكراش investigators بيجيبوها عشان يقدروا يصمموا بيها passenger safety inside cars. So you will analyze the different collision situations, and it will help you in the unit project to redesign a safety feature for drivers. I want you to open your book on page 236 and look at the car photo. I think you see the photo now. Of course, you observed that the front part of the car is damaged. As you see this picture, can you predict what is the object that collided with the car? طيب, what is the mass of this object? Is it huge or small? طب يا ترى هي خبطت في حاجة stable or fast moving object? And you should say the reason for your prediction. Think of this, for example. My student Amira predicted that this car might have collided with a stable wall or an object with a large mass moving in opposite direction because it's undamaged from behind. أميرة قالت إن هي ممكن تبقى خبطت في حاجة واقفة أو خبطت في حاجة كبيرة جاية في الopposite direction لأن البيهايند الباك بتاع العربية ما حصلش فيه damage. But Ahmed said that if the object collided with it was in the opposite direction, the car's glass might be affected. أحمد بيظن إن لو حاجة خبطتها من قدام ممكن إزاز العربية يتكسر. But this didn't happen. So it's more possible that it has collided with the wall. Now, we are acting like crash investigators, dealing with the accident as a puzzle and depend on their skills of observing and analyzing besides using their knowledge of the concepts like force, speed, energy, and collision. To know what? To know the reason for this accident. Let's know more about what data do crash investigators collect at the crash sites. So let's read the text and analyze it. هتلاقوا التكست في page 236 and 237 in your book. The title is Crash Investigator. I want you to hold your pen and underline the different measurements and tasks that a crash investigator need to do when they are notified of an accident. عايزاكم تعملوا underline على كل المهمات اللي الكراش investigators بيعملوها لما حد بيبلغهم إن في حادثة. And what is the most important data they have to collect. ابتدوا اقروا التكست. Did you identify the investigator's first task? Start underlining using the pen. The investigator's first task is to measure things at the accident scene. They measure the damage to the cars and where the cars ended up after the crash. بيشوفوا ايه اللي حصل في العربية من damage والعربية وضعها اتحرك بقت فين. This means that if I am a crash investigator, the first task I will do is to look at the two cars. They do not have to be also in the site of the crash. They might use photos or videos not to block the road, like when we used the photo at the beginning of our lesson. The investigator begins to record data about the damage that occurred in each car. خلاص بعد ما عين كده ايه اللي حصل هيبتدي يكتبها. Are all the parts of the car destroyed? Not the front part only? Or is it the back part of the car? Do the two cars have the same amount of damage? Or are the damage greater in only one car? هيبتدي يكتب العربية باظت من قدام، باظت من ورا، العربيتين باظوا زي بعض، ولا في عربية اتأثرت أكتر. The size of the damage in the car could be evidence of what? Why do crash investigators record data on the damage? Do you remember the clay we used in hands-on investigation? When its shape changes because of dropping it strongly. فاكرين صحابنا لما جم هنا وعملوا معانا تجربة وكان في معانا ولد مسك الكلاي وخبطه جامد. ايه اللي حصل لشكل الكلاي؟ اتغير خالص. طب اتغير ليه؟ This percentage of damage it can indicate the force of collision. قوة التصادم. So crash investigators also identify the place where the cars arrived after the collision. العربية وضعها اتغير بقى فين. Where exactly did the collision happen? And how far did the car move? العربية اتحركت من هنا لهنا. Do you think this also could be evidence of what? Go back to the investigations of the speed concept. Which car pushed the cup further? فاكرين برضو في الهاندز اون انفستيجيشن لما نزلنا عربية وخبطت كوباية والكوباية اتحركت، أنهي عربية حركت الكوباية أكتر؟ Is it the fast car or the slow one? For sure the fast car, because the kinetic energy was greater. The faster one transferred greater part of their kinetic energy during collision with the cup. So identifying the location where the cars reached after the collision could be evidence of the speed that the driver of the two cars use. لما بعرف مكان العربيات اتغير ازاي بعد التصادم اقدر اتوقع سرعة العربيات دي كانت عاملة ازاي. Do you think what are the other factors which crash investigators collect data about? هيجمعوا data عن ايه كمان؟ I'm sure many of you are saying in a loud voice mass. Underline this sentence. Crash investigator need to know the force that acted on vehicle and the mass. They measure the mass directly using a scale. بيقيسوا الماس الكتلة عن طريق ميزان. Mass is measured by a scale designed to measure the car's mass by putting it on the car to identify its mass. طب هما يستفادوا ايه من الماس؟ When we know the mass أكيد هنبتدي نعرف أنهي عربية أتقل في أنهي عربية هتعمل more damage. By knowing the mass, we can analyze the reason of the difference in the damage of the two cars in the crash accidents. For example, the car with a larger mass, its damage and impact will be greater than the car with less mass. العربيات التقيلة هتعمل more damage and impact عن العربيات الصغننة. Are there other ways to help the crash investigators identify the collision force? Let's read and underline this sentence at the end of the text together. Crash investigators compare the cars from the crash to the data the car manufacturers supply. بيقارنوا شكل العربية بشكل العربية اللي المصنع عملها. This comparison helped them know how much force was involved in the crash. The data of the manufacturer means that the data we get from the company that made the car. أكيد الشركات اللي بتصنع العربيات دي بتعمل داتا ليها، بيانات ليها. فبيقارنوا الكراش انفستيجيتورز بيقارنوا بيانات العربية قبل التصادم ببيانات العربية اللي المصنع الشركة المصنعة كاتباها. These manufacturers or car makers make cars and expose them to collision experiments. We talked about these cars tests in the unit introduction. Then, by using certain devices, they measure the amount of force that can cause damage to the car during the collision. Then the data they have after more than one experiment, they keep as a reference data. مصنعين السيارات دايما بيعملوا اختبارات على العربية، يشوفوا ايه اللي بيحصل لها وقت التصادم. كل البيانات دي والتجارب اللي بيعملوها لازم بيكتبوها. We can refer to these data if we want to know the amount of force that can act on the vehicle that was manufactured and caused damage. So we can summarize the data and measurements the crash investigator collect in 3 main points. أظن كده خدتوا بالكم crash investigators مفروض يجمعوا إيه من بيانات. أول حاجة measuring the damage happened to the cars and where the car ended after the crash. تاني حاجة they measure the mass of the car by a scale. تالت حاجة measuring the force using the reference material of the manufacturer. طيب, do you remember when we talked about entrepreneurs and said they try to think creative solutions to their problems? I think after reading the text, what are the ways the crash investigators uses creativity and entrepreneurship skills in? They must analyze the problem, identify its reasons. لازم يشوفوا ايه هي البروبلم وايه اسبابها. And try to know the cause and effect. And use imagination, observation and analysis. Or make different predictions about collision location before and after the crash sites. We are also using the same skills and all we have learned about energy, collision and crash investigators data. We will analyze scenarios for different collision accidents. I want you to open your school book on page 238. تعالوا أوريكم الصور. These are 2 photos or diagrams drawn by a collision investigator for the motion of vehicles before the accidents, so that you can imagine what could have happened at the time of the collision. خلي بالكم هما كل اللي بيعملوه توقعات. This is the crash site in the first scenario. هنا هنبتدي نتكلم على الفيرست سيناريو. اوكي؟ تمام. Okay, it's before the accident. The red car drove through the intersection from a stop. ال red car هتبتدي تتحرك من ال intersection. ده كان الدايركشن بتاعها. Okay? This was the direction of the red car before collision. Okay? And the blue car continued in a straight line. So the blue car hit the red car. البلو كار كانت ماشية كده. Okay? فالبلو كار هتخبط الريد كار. I want you to look closely at the photo. Well, and draw an arrow that show the direction of the red car after the collision. متخيلين هنا البلو كار لما هتخبط الريد كار اللي ماشية كده هتوديها فين؟ By the way, the 2 cars are equal in mass. Think of this. I expect that the blue car will push the red car on its right side. هتحرك الريد كار من هنا هتخليها تخش كده. Okay? Because it's going to hit it from the side. So the red car will change its direction to the right due to the pushing force. Meaning the arrow is drawn to the right. Okay? تاني في أول situation الريد كار ماشية كده والبلو كار ماشية كده. When the blue car hit the red car, it changed its direction to the right. Okay? Let's see the second scenario. نبص على تاني صورة. I want you to identify the direction of the motion of the red car after the collision. برضو فركزوا جدا. Where the red car will be. As you see, the red car was driving through the intersection legally. الريد كار المرة دي كانت ماشية من ال intersection legally. Okay? And it's going to the right. مفروض ان هي كانت هتخش right side كده. تمام؟ But the blue car was driving in the wrong lane. البلو كار كانت ماشية عكس الاتجاه meaning in the opposite direction. Okay? عرفت منين ان البلو كار هي اللي ماشية غلط؟ لان احنا في البلد في الرايت لين دايما ده الاتجاه الصح بتاعنا وبنسيب الليفت لين للعربيات اللي جايه العكس. فمفروض ان البلو كار مكانها كان يبقى هنا لو هي ماشيه في الاتجاه الصح. Okay? So the car must move on the right side and leave the left side for the coming cars from the opposite direction. It also walk faster than the red car. يبقى هنا عندي البلو car is faster. Okay? And the red car is traveling less than the specified speed. يبقى red car ماشيه بالسبيد الصح. So what can we conclude from this? We conclude that the faster car has more kinetic energy and pushing force. So the collision occurred from the front part of the two cars. هنا العربية الزرقاء عشان ماشية بسرعة أكبر هيبقى عندها more kinetic energy، فبالتالي هتعمل تأثير، وبما إن العربيتين هيخبطوا في بعض كده فهيبقى عندي damage from the front side. What do you expect will happen to the red car after the collision؟ لما العربيتين هيخبطوا في بعض إيه اللي هيحصل؟ Where will you draw the arrow؟ I expect the blue car will transfer its kinetic energy to the red car. So the red car will return and walk in the opposite direction. أنا متوقعة إن لما البلو كار هتخبط في الريد كار عشان هي سرعتها أكبر هيكون تأثيرها أكبر. So the red car will change its direction في ال opposite way. Meaning the arrow is drawn to the right. يعني هترجع لورا. By analyzing these collision scenarios, we will reach the last activity in our lesson. Let me prepare it for you. The last activity in our lesson is on page 239. Evaluate like a scientist. In this activity, we should think about what we have learned about collisions and summarize basic ideas such as the relationship between energy, motion, speed, and collision. Do you remember the mind maps? The mind map can help you easily summarize the main ideas and connect concepts and terms. دايما المايند ماب بتساعدك انك ترتب افكارك وتربط كمان الكلمات اللي انت اتعلمتها ببعض. We use mind maps in career skills a lot. Pay attention to what I'm going to do because it will help you every time you have a question like this one. تعالوا بينا نشوف. I write the word collision and then draw arrows out of it. Those arrows are pointing to three terms. مين هما؟ Motion, energy, and speed. Motion, energy, and speed. In the first concept, starting and stopping, we knew that any object wouldn't move by itself. It must be affected by something. What is it? That's right, by a force. في أول concept اتعلمنا إن أي object عشان يتحرك لازم حاجة تبقى applied عليه اللي هي الفورس، القوة. So for the object to move, we need force. طيب when this object really moves الفورس دي ممكن يبقى نوعها ايه؟ الفورس ممكن تبقى pushing or pulling force. فهطلع two words من كلمة force. pushing or pulling. And to affect an object strongly, you must exert what? Exert, work on it. And work needs amount of what? Energy. So first, let me write work. وعشان أقدر أعمل الwork بتاعي, I must have energy. So there is a relation between work and energy. تمام؟ طيب تاني. الأوبجكت بيتحرك عشان في pushing or pulling force. كده لو الأوبجكت اتحرك يبقى work is done. This means I had energy. Okay? So energy will be that the object must be affected by force and this force needs energy. And we learned in the concept of energy and motion that there are two basic types of energy. اللي هم مين؟ Potential energy and kinetic energy. نوعين الانرجي الرئيسيين اللي اتكلمنا عنهم potential energy and kinetic energy. وقلنا different examples على الانرجيز دي، زي مثلا في الكاينتيك انرجي قلنا الساوند والهيت واللايت والالكتريك انرجي كانوا examples على الكاينتيك انرجي اللي هي الانرجي of moving objects. واتكلمنا على البوتنشال انرجي وقلنا different types ليها زي الجرافيتيشنال potential energy وكمان الالاستيك potential energy والchemical potential energy stored in our body because we eat food. واتفقنا ان الانرجيز must change او transform from one form to another. طب what is the relation we explored between kinetic energy and speed? In the speed concept we proved that the greater object's kinetic energy the greater its speed. اتفقنا في الكونسبت بتاع السبيد ان كل ما الكاينتيك انرجي هتزيد السبيد كمان هتزيد. Okay? And the speed is one of the factors related to collisions. واتفقنا ان التصادم بيعتمد على السبيد، اكيد بيفرق كتير قوي لو الاوبجكت ده كان سريع او بطيء. And we knew the fast object with large mass. ايه ده ثانية واحدة، احنا قلنا mass لازم نكتبها. Collision also depend on mass. Okay, so the other thing that affects collision is mass, speed and mass. The larger mass objects have large amount of kinetic energy, and if collision occur, they will cause more damage than objects that are less in speed and less in mass. كل ما الأوبجكت كان سريع وتقيل هيعمل دامج كبير جدا في الكوليجن. طيب فاكرين قلنا ايه اللي بيحصل للانرجي during a collision؟ energy transformation occur. هيحصل انتقال للطاقة including kinetic energy that transfer between objects. An amount of this energy is lost in form of sound such as the sounds of collision or heat energy resulting from the objects rubbing against each other. لو انتوا فاكرين لما اتكلمنا على نيوتنز كريدل اتفقنا ان في جزء من الطاقة من الكاينتيك انرجي بيتحول لكاينتيك انرجي للبول اللي بعدها، في جزء بيتحول لساوند انرجي صوت التصادم، في جزء كمان بيتحول لهيت انرجي اللي بتبقى ناتجة عن الفريكشن الاحتكاك ما بين الكور. What is the relation between the force concept and collision? Force also is a factor. العلاقة ما بين الفورس والcollision. الفورس كمان it's a factor affecting the collision. If an object is pushed or affected by a greater force, it will be greatly affected during the collision. فاكرين لما صحابنا رموا الكلي with great force in the third trial and we found that the shape is more affected than the first and the second trial, which had less force. I think that mind maps are a good way to summarize ideas and help you remember the information easily. You can also draw a mind map in the notebook and organize your thoughts to write a summary of the relation between energy, motion, speed, and collision. And I want you also to explain what happens when objects collide and how energy is transferred or transformed between them. خلي بالكم المايند مابس مش لازم تبقى بالشكل ده بالظبط، كل واحد فيكم يقدر يرتب أفكاره بطريقته، يعني مش لازم كلنا نبقى copy paste. If you have any additional questions about speed or collision, write them down after the summary and think of how we can use all that we have learned to think of a way to improve the safety factors in vehicles. The students in my class try to think of ways to help us reduce collision damage and improve vehicle safety. تلاميذي فكروا في طرق ان هم يقللوا الاضرار اللي بتحصل وقت التصادم. فكرنا في حاجتين اساسيين. We thought about the mass and the speed of the trucks. انا عندي مشكلتين، لو الماس كبيره هيحصل دامج كتير، ولو السبيد كبيره هيحصل دامج كتير. طب ما نحاول نقلل واحده فيهم. So we started asking, can manufacturers make vehicles which mass is so large that their speed doesn't exceed 60 kilometers per hour? This means that this will not only be a traffic law to reduce speed, because it can be the design of the car. أخدتوا بالكم احنا طلبنا ايه؟ بنفكر ان ليه ما يبقاش العربيات الكبيرة التقيلة سرعتها ما تعديش 60 كيلومتر per hour، فكده يبقى عندنا البروبلم بتاعت الماس، بس خلاص خلصنا بروبلم السبيد. And there was an idea about the airbag. If we made a car with airbags at each door, outside and from the front, as we saw in the watching objects colloid video, how much the collision force could be reduced. تخيلوا كده عملنا airbags all around the car, inside and outside the car. These are different ideas, and you can search using the internet for additional ideas of safety factors. Finally, we have reached the end of the concept. Now, you are ready to go back to the anchor phenomena of the science of car crashes and the questions we raised at the unit introduction, and start doing the project that focuses on redesigning a tool to protect drivers. I think you are ready to start preparing your projects. Thank you, and see you next time.